There are nights when the entire sky seems to hold its breath, waiting for a great upheaval to erupt inside those lavish mansions where power is traded like currency. Some dynasties appear untouchable, yet they tremble before the smallest threats, the bloodline, and there are hearts, wrapped in gold and silver, that still shiver in the shadow of loss. This is the night when one of the wealthiest families in America steps into a storm of suspicion, love, and betrayal. The Monroe estate in the Hamptons glistened under crystal chandeliers, a colossal marble fortress towering over the Atlantic shore, oak-paneled walls, imported Persian rugs, and ancestral portraits pressed heavy with history. But tonight, it wasn't the past that weighed upon the air. It was the family's future, dangling on a silence taut as a drawn string. Nathaniel Monroe sat at the head of the long mahogany dining table, fingers tapping a steady rhythm against the polished surface. He commanded a media empire sprawling across 3 continents at 34, yet he could not command his own fate. His gaze fixed on the antique clock above the fireplace, its cold metallic gleam slicing each second into his mind like a blade. 11 months. That was all the time left until his 35th birthday. 11 months to fulfill his father's will, produce an heir, or see the family fortune diverted to charity, leaving him with nothing. From the corner of the room, a woman's voice rang out soft, yet sharp as a knife. "Still brooding over your father's will, Nathaniel." It was Victoria Sterling Monroe, Charles Monroe's 3rd wife. She glided into the room with commanding poise, the red silk of her dress clinging to curves preserved by meticulous surgery. A gentle smile lingered on her lips, but her hawk-like eyes gleamed coldly. Nathaniel drew a long breath, his voice rough. "I'm thinking of Sophie," his wife, Sophie Harper. The brown-skinned woman with luminous eyes and a tender smile had stood by him for 3 years. Yet in those 3 years, the grand halls of this mansion had not once echoed with the cries of a child. Victoria moved closer, trailing a manicured finger along an ancient porcelain vase as though caressing a pet. 3 years, and still no little Monroe running through these halls. A pity. For an empire that commands dozens of networks and hundreds of newspapers, its voice, shaping the nation, it cannot even preserve its own bloodline. Nathaniel's jaw clenched, his face hardening. Behind his calm exterior, his heart writhed between love and suffocating duty. Wealth did not scare him, he had built fortunes of his own. But the name Monroe, the legacy carved through 4 generations, that he could not allow to vanish. A crisp knock rattled the door. Christopher Sterling entered. Victoria's son from her first marriage was 28, tall and impeccably groomed, and his golden hair was styled with arrogant precision. His smile radiated charm, but his eyes glimmered with calculation, raised as though he were a Monroe, yet no drop of their blood flowed in his veins. To Victoria, however, he was the true heir. "Brother," Christopher greeted warmly, stretching his arms for a perfunctory embrace. "I just wanted to say how sorry I am for you and Sophie. This kind of pressure, it can destroy any marriage." His tone was sympathetic, but the gleam in his eyes betrayed a predator's delight. "We're fine," Nathaniel said flatly, his voice tightly coiled. "Are you?" Christopher tilted his head, grin widening. "People do say stress can affect fertility. Perhaps you should consult a specialist. I happen to know an excellent doctor." Victoria and Christopher exchanged a glance too fleeting for most to notice, but enough for Nathaniel to understand. In this house, looks carried the weight of daggers, and whispers could bury an entire career. "And where is Sophie?" Victoria asked, settling herself opposite Nathaniel like a queen upon her throne. "I hope the poor girl isn't as frail as she seemed lately. Fragile women often struggle to keep a household happy." Her words stabbed deeper than any blade. Lately, Sophie had been weak, dizzy, nauseous, fatigued. She dismissed it as stress, but fear gnawed at Nathaniel. He gazed toward the ceiling, where her bedroom lay cloaked in darkness. "She's resting," he said quietly. "Perhaps I should go up," Victoria offered sweetly, rising. "Sometimes a woman needs another woman to confide in." "No." Nathaniel's voice cut sharply. Finally, silence thickened the room. For a fleeting moment, Victoria's smile cracked, revealing the glacial steel beneath, before she masked it again with feigned warmth. The clock ticked relentlessly, each second a judgment. Nathaniel sat among his kin yet felt like the accused, a man on the verge of losing not money or power but honor, the Monroe name, the legacy his great-grandfather had built from nothing. Then came the sound of heels upon the spiral staircase. All heads turned. A slender figure descended. Sophie Harper, draped in a white silk nightdress. Her brown skin glowed against the dim light, her black hair cascading over her shoulders. But what seized the room was her hand, resting gently upon her belly, the primal gesture of a mother. Nathaniel froze, breath stolen. The realization detonated inside him. Sophie was pregnant. The room collapsed into stunned silence. Victoria's fork clattered against her plate. Christopher's wineglass stalled mid-air. Even the chandelier above seemed to dim, bowing before the moment's gravity. Sophie crossed the room, her eyes luminous with joy. Kneeling by Nathaniel's chair, she clasped his trembling hands. Her voice was soft, yet it rang like sacred music. "I went to the doctor today. The results? We're going to have a baby." Nathaniel's chest cracked open with relief and wonder. He gathered her into his arms, hot tears spilling freely. 3 years of waiting, of hope and despair now. At last, a miracle. "How long?" he whispered into her hair. 6 weeks, Sophie smiled. "I wanted to be certain before telling you." In his embrace, she was his salvation. But over her shoulder, Nathaniel met Victoria's gaze. No joy, no blessing, only cold hunger, a predator watching prey. Christopher's face had drained of color, his hand strangling the stem of his glass. "How wonderful," Victoria finally murmured, her voice hollow. "A child. How very timely." The word timely struck Nathaniel's blood like ice. In her tone, there was no celebration, only suspicion, as though Sophie's pregnancy were a maneuver, not a miracle. "We should toast," Christopher interjected stiffly, his smile as brittle as porcelain. "Champagne for everyone except Sophie, of course. She must abstain." Sophie's shoulders trembled, pressing closer to Nathaniel. He rose instantly, wrapping a protective arm around her. "We're going upstairs. She needs rest." "Indeed," Victoria nodded, her smile sharp as glass. "Rest is crucial, especially in the first trimester, when everything is still fragile." Sophie's breath hitched. Rage flared in Nathaniel's chest. He heard the threat coiled inside her words. Tonight, the truth was laid bare. Their unborn child had become a target. In this house of power, those fearing loss would stop at nothing to destroy. As Nathaniel guided Sophie upstairs, the dining hall blazed behind them in cruel crystal light. Victoria and Christopher remained at the table, statues of malice, eyes smoldering with quiet fury. The game had begun, and Sophie Harper, the gentle woman who had just brought hope to the Monroe line, had now become prey in a battle for legacy. 3 days after that fateful night, when joy had barely settled, a phone call thrust Nathaniel into a nightmare he never anticipated. The phone rang early Monday morning as he prepared to leave for Manhattan. On the other end was a deep and gravelly voice he had known all his life. Dr. Alan Morrison was the physician who had served the Monroe family for 3 generations. "Nathaniel, you need to come see me. Alone. Don't bring Sophie. This changes everything." His voice was heavy, urgent enough to send a chill down Nathaniel's spine. For a few seconds after hanging up, Nathaniel just sat frozen. Morrison had delivered him into this world, patched up broken bones when he fell from a horse, and overseen every annual checkup for the family. He was more than a doctor, he was nearly family, trusted implicitly by Nathaniel's father. If someone like Morrison called him with such grave urgency, it could only mean disaster. Driving to the red brick building that housed the practice, Nathaniel felt as if he were approaching a familiar and alien place. The pale blue sign Morrison Family Practice hung quietly above the entrance. He had walked through those doors hundreds of times, but today every brick, every window frame, every potted plant lining the path seemed cloaked in an inexplicable gloom. Inside, the reception area looked unchanged. Yellow walls, once warm and inviting, now sickly and pale, like the skin of a dying patient. The nurse at the front desk offered a tight smile. "Doctors are waiting for you in room 3. Nathaniel signed in, noticing how unsteady his handwriting had become. The exam room was achingly familiar. Wooden file cabinets, a dark oak desk, the pungent sting of disinfectant. Morrison stood by the desk, silver-haired, lined with age. But today his eyes carried a heaviness Nathaniel had never seen before. On the desk lay a thick folder, waiting like a sealed verdict. "Sit down, Nathaniel." His voice rasped, weighted with mock sympathy. As soon as Nathaniel sat, Morrison locked the door, drew the blinds, and took his seat across from him. He placed his hand firmly on the folder. "What I'm about to tell you may be the hardest thing you'll ever hear." Nathaniel frowned. "What is this about?" Slowly, Morrison opened the folder, spreading out blood test results and dense DNA charts. "It's about the child, about Sophie's pregnancy." Nathaniel's chest constricted. Morrison pointed at the tangled genetic codes. "The Monroe family, for 4 generations, has carried certain unique genetic markers. I've maintained the records your great-grandfather, father, even you a kind of genetic fingerprint, but the sample I tested from Sophie shows no trace of it. The child does not carry the Monroe markers." Nathaniel shook his head, lips dry. "That's impossible." "Are you sure?" "There has to be some mistake." Morrison's voice dropped. "I ran the test 3 times, not just here. I sent samples to Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, and Stanford. Every result was the same. Nathaniel, this child is not yours." The room spun. Nathaniel gripped the armrests to keep upright, his ears filling with the rush of blood. Each word Morrison spoke struck like a hammer blow. "No, Sophie. She would never betray me." Morrison sighed, his eyes glinting with something strange, half pity, half triumph. "I wish I were wrong, but the evidence is undeniable. In fact, the markers suggest the father has partial Latin American heritage. And if I recall correctly, did you once have a business partner, Ethan Delgado? The profile matches perfectly." The name pierced Nathaniel's chest like a blade. Ethan Delgado, the former confidant, the strategic partner who later betrayed him, stealing clients and sensitive documents. Nathaniel had severed all ties, but Ethan remained a bitter shadow. And now Morrison was implying Sophie had betrayed him with him. Where did you even get that idea?" Nathaniel's voice cracked. "The timing of conception aligns with your 2-week Tokyo trip. Sophie stayed in New York. If she was lonely, perhaps." Morrison let the pause hang, twisting the silence into Nathaniel's mind like a knife. Cold sweat broke across his brow. Images flashed. Sophie's warm smile at dinner, the sparkle in her eyes when speaking of their future, the tenderness of her embrace. Each memory crumbled beneath Morrison's words. A part of him screamed it was impossible. Another part drowned under the weight of the documents on the desk, unyielding, damning. "Maybe. It's a lab error." "You know that's possible, Alan," Nathaniel pleaded. Morrison shook his head. "I thought so too. But 3 separate labs? Identical results. It's not an error." Silence pressed down for what felt like an eternity. When Nathaniel finally looked up, his eyes burned red. "Does my father know?" "Not yet, but he will. Soon. And you understand the consequences. If the child isn't yours, you won't just lose the inheritance, you'll lose your father's trust. You'll lose the family's honor." Morrison closed the folder with a snap, his voice sinking. "My advice, file for divorce. Quickly. Once the truth comes out, you'll bring down the entire Monroe dynasty if you stand by Sophie. This empire cannot be handed to a child without Monroe blood." Nathaniel sat in shattered silence, hands clenched so tightly the skin split at his knuckles. He had faced billion-dollar negotiations, ruthless politicians, and cutthroat tycoons. But now, a stack of paper had reduced him to nothing. When he finally stumbled out of the clinic, the New York sky hung heavy with gray clouds. Traffic roared, horns blared, but to Nathaniel, the world was muted, hollow. He sat in his car for nearly an hour, staring at the steering wheel, replaying Morrison's words repeatedly. Sophie called 3 times and texted him sweet notes. "Will you be home for dinner? Should I cook your favorite dish?" What once would have melted his heart now pierced like needles. Was she his angel, or his betrayer? The woman he had given everything to, or just a skilled actress in a 3-year performance? Meanwhile, Back at the Hamptons estate, Victoria reclined in the library, lips curling into a thin smile as she ended a brief phone call. It's done. Nathaniel believes it. She set down the phone and raised her glass of red wine, its dark reflection flickering in her eyes like spilled blood. Christopher, seated opposite, asked quietly, "And Sophie?" Victoria shrugged. "She'll destroy herself soon enough. All we need to do is wait." At that moment, Sophie sat alone in the vast main bedroom, her hand resting gently over her belly. She whispered, "My darling, I will protect you. No matter what happens, you are my light." She had no idea that the family she had trusted was already weaving her downfall, and that her husband, the man she believed in utterly, was drifting from her arms under the weight of carefully constructed lies. Thursday breakfast at the Hamptons estate was usually warm sunlight spilling through the great glass windows, the scent of coffee and toast in the air. But that morning, the vast room felt colder than usual despite the roaring fire. Nathaniel sat across from Sophie, his coffee gone cold and untouched. His eyes were fixed on a financial paper, though his mind clearly wasn't. Sophie's eyes shone, her brown skin glowing with the quiet radiance of a pregnant woman, yet her smile seemed to hang in the air, never quite reaching her husband's heart. "I've been thinking about names," Sophie said softly, trying to draw him into conversation. She set her spoon on the saucer, eyes alight. "If it's a boy, I'd like to name him after your father, Charles. And if it's a girl," she paused, gaze tender, "Elizabeth, your mother. It would be meaningful, so she's remembered through her granddaughter." Nathaniel's grip tightened on the newspaper until his knuckles blanched. Elizabeth, the name twisted like a blade. His mother had died giving birth to his baby sister, the child stillborn a tragedy that left his father obsessed with blood heirs for life. Did Sophie not know, or did she know and say it anyway? He looked up, eyes cool. "Elizabeth," he repeated, voice arid, then took a sip of coffee gone flat and cold. Sophie faltered, her smile dimming, but she pressed on. "What do you think? I thought your father would be happy to hear it." Nathaniel said nothing. Morrison's voice drummed in his head. "The child is not yours." Every gesture Sophie made had become evidence to him. She was too happy, too confident. Was it because she was hiding the truth from him? Or because she genuinely believed the baby was his? "What's wrong?" Sophie asked gently, worry edging her tone. "You've been different lately, since I told you. You barely touch me. You hardly talk like before. Are you hiding something from me?" He lowered the paper, met her gaze, and tried to keep his voice even. "It's just work. A few big deals I have to handle." "No, that's not it." Sophie laid a hand on the table. Her voice trembled. "I know you. I can feel it. You're pulling away from me, Nate. Every time I come close, you step back." Nathaniel wanted to pull her into his arms, to chase the fear from her eyes. But then Ethan Delgado's face flashed in his mind, his half-smile at parties, the way his gaze lingered too long on Sophie. Morrison's words seeped through him like poison. At that exact moment, his phone buzzed. A text lit the screen. "Congratulations. I hear you've got happy news at home." "Ethan." Nathaniel went numb. His heart pounded. Heat surged to his face. How did Ethan know? Did Sophie tell him? Or was he taunting? He flicked the screen away before Sophie could see, but she had already sensed the change in his eyes. "Who was that?" Sophie asked. Voice light but gaze probing. "No one important," Nathaniel said, slipping the phone into his pocket. A flicker of hurt crossed her eyes, then she forced a small smile. "You're scaring me, Nate. I don't want us to start a new chapter with this distance. We've survived so much together. Please don't push me away." He looked at her, his heart ready to melt. But Morrison's verdict echoed again. "You cannot be the father." His faith wavered, love warping into a gnawing doubt. That day, Nathaniel threw himself into work in Manhattan like a man running from a fire. He signed stacks of contracts and made call after call, yet every word blurred with the image of Sophie's morning smile. From the 60th floor, the city stretched out vast, busy, and mercilessly cold. He could command a media empire, but not his own heart. At noon, his secretary came in. "Mr. Monroe, there's a visitor, Dr. Patterson." He says he needs to speak privately about your wife." Nathaniel stiffened. Patterson, the OB-GYN Morrison, had mentioned that the doctor Sophie had secretly seen. His grip tightened around his pen. "Send him away. I don't want to hear it." The secretary nodded, curiosity sparking in her eyes. Rumors began to spread through the company like wildfire. Mrs. Monroe was pregnant, but the boss didn't seem pleased. That evening, Nathaniel returned to the Hamptons late. The house was quiet, with only the soft amber glow from the living room lamps. Sophie sat waiting, a bowl of soup gone cold on the table. When she saw him, she offered a wan smile. "I waited for you. I thought we could have dinner together." "I already ate," Nathaniel lied, loosening his tie as he walked past. Sophie's smile shattered. "How long will you keep avoiding me?" "Nate, we're husband and wife. You have to trust me." "Trust?" Nathaniel turned, voice sharp as glass. "Why should I trust you?" Tears brimmed in her eyes for a heartbeat, but she lifted her chin with quiet pride. "Because I have never betrayed you. Because the child I'm carrying is yours. Whether you believe it or not, that is the truth." Nathaniel said nothing. Her words flared like fire against the walls he'd built, but Morrison, Victoria, Christopher phantoms ringed him, whispering, "She's lying." That night, Nathaniel lay in bed with his back to Sophie. She curled her arm around him and whispered, "I'm more afraid of losing you than anything. Please don't leave me." He remained silent, eyes wide open in the dark. He was torn in two, love on one side, fear of betrayal on the other, and above all, the noose of his father's will tightening around his throat. Victoria approached Charles Monroe, Nathaniel's father, in the estate library the next day. Her tone was syrup-sweet. "I'm worried, Charles. Sophie is suspicious. Her pregnancy at this time is too convenient. I'm afraid Nathaniel is being deceived." Charles peered at her over his reading glasses, suspicion flickering. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm only saying, be prepared. If the child isn't your grandchild, we must act before the legacy is ruined." Outside the door, Christopher listened, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The scheme was on course. Upstairs, Sophie sat before the mirror, studying her face. She saw the bruised half-moons beneath her eyes from sleepless nights, but the light in them remained. She placed a hand over her belly and whispered, "My love, your father is lost right now, but I will fight. I won't let anyone tear this family apart." Late that night, Nathaniel's phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "She still messages me. You're so naive, Nate." No signature, but Nathaniel knew. Ethan Delgado. He stood at the window, staring out at the black sweep of the Hamptons Sea. Waves hammered the shore. The wind hissed through the trees like laughter in his ears. Doubt had sunk its roots too deep. He glanced back at Sophie, sleeping peacefully, lips curved faintly in a dream. He no longer knew whether he was looking at the face of an angel or a traitor. And he, Nathaniel Monroe, once untouchable, was now just a man tormented by a doubt with no exit. That morning, sunlight streamed through white lace curtains into the vast bedroom, yet Sophie felt no warmth. She sat before the mirror, hands cradling her belly, listening to her heartbeat and imagining she could hear the faint rhythm of her child's. The silence of the enormous house pressed down on her chest. Nathaniel had left early, leaving only a short note on the desk. "I have business in Manhattan. Don't wait for me for dinner." The cold words cut like a knife. Once, he had left her tender notes every morning. Now, they were gone. Sophie drew a long breath and studied her reflection. Faint shadows clung beneath her eyes from sleepless nights, but the light within them still burned. She whispered to herself, "I must not break, not for anyone. My child needs me to be strong." A knock at the door. The butler informed her that Mrs. Victoria wished to see her in the small sitting room. Sophie blinked, startled. Since the news of her pregnancy, Victoria's remarks have been nothing but barbed and mocking at family dinners, never an invitation to speak privately. Sophie's instincts told her this meeting was no ordinary visit. The sitting room was elegantly appointed, sunlight spilling through expansive windows overlooking the rose garden. Victoria sat poised in a pale blue dress, her golden hair curled neatly, her smile polished to perfection, but Sophie saw the blades hidden in those sharp eyes. "Sit, Sophie," Victoria invited sweetly. "I only want to talk a little about the baby." Sophie lowered herself onto the sofa opposite, holding her composure. "Of course, I'm listening." Victoria tilted her head, studying her like a scientist observing a specimen. Quite the coincidence. After 3 years, just as the family's future is under scrutiny, suddenly you have good news. Charles grows old, the will burdens Nathaniel, and then miraculously you are with child. Truly remarkable. Each word pierced like a blade. Sophie pressed her lips together before answering, "Not a coincidence. A miracle. A gift from God." Victoria chuckled softly, sipping her tea. "Perhaps. But in families such as ours, Sophie, God's gifts require scientific proof. You know how obsessed Charles is with bloodlines. Have you considered genetic testing before the birth? Just to be certain." The suggestion struck Sophie like a slap. Slowly, she placed a hand over her stomach, her gaze steady. "This is Nathaniel's child. No test is needed to prove that." Victoria's eyes flickered with irritation, quickly veiled beneath another smile. Of course. I only worry about the family. Still, you must be careful. The first trimester is so fragile. Even the smallest accident could ruin everything." A chill laced Sophie's spine. Those words were not a warning, they were a threat. She rose, her voice calm but firm. "Thank you for your concern, but I know what I must do to protect my child." Victoria set her teacup down, her eyes cold as Sophie left the room. Once the door closed, her smile fell away, replaced by ruthless calculation. Upstairs, Sophie's heart still pounded. She knew she was being watched, cornered. Victoria's suspicion was only part of it. She was preparing something more, and Nathaniel, the man meant to protect her, was slipping further away, as though he believed the lies. That afternoon, Sophie reached for her phone. First, she called her physician in Brooklyn, Dr. Sarah Williams, who had overseen her health before her marriage. "Sarah, I need all my medical records from the past year. Every file. I want copies kept privately." Sarah sounded surprised. "Sophie, is something wrong? You sound tense." "I just need peace of mind. I want full documentation of my pregnancy. If anyone questions it, I'll have proof." Silence. Then Sarah's voice softened. "I'll prepare it. But Sophie, you're fighting a battle, aren't you?" Sophie inhaled deeply. "Perhaps I am." Her second call was to Jessica, her closest college friend, who is now a family lawyer in Philadelphia. "Jess, I need legal advice. If someone wanted to challenge a child's paternity, what would they need?" Jessica's voice sharpened. "Sophie, what's going on? Are you and Nathaniel? Just answer me. Suppose they claim the child isn't the husband's." Jessica sighed. "Serious now. They'd need a DNA test. They could also try presenting evidence of infidelity messages, witnesses, anything. But Sophie, if this isn't hypothetical, you must be very careful. Paternity disputes are brutal." Sophie closed her eyes, nodding. "I understand. Be ready. I may need you." Her final call was to her mother in Baltimore. When told of Sophie's pregnancy, her mother wept with joy. "Oh Lord, finally such wonderful news. Nathaniel must be overjoyed." Sophie's throat tightened. He's under pressure. Mother, if anything happens, I want you to remember one thing. This baby is Nathaniel's. No one must ever claim otherwise." There was a long pause before her mother spoke, firm and unwavering. "I believe you, Sophie, and if needed, I'll testify for you. You are not alone." Those words warmed her, though she knew the road ahead would be merciless. That night, Nathaniel returned late. Entering their room, he found Sophie sitting on the bed, bathed in the lamp's soft glow, hands resting over her belly, her gaze fierce with new resolve. "I need to talk to you," she said. He frowned. "I'm tired, Sophie. Let's talk later." "No, now." Her voice cut sharply. "You've changed since I told you I was pregnant. You've grown distant, cold. You don't believe me, do you?" Nathaniel avoided her eyes. I'm just worried. You wouldn't understand. No, I do. Sophie stepped closer. Someone is planting doubt. Someone wants to destroy us. And instead of standing by me, you're turning away. Nate, do you think I've betrayed you? His fists clenched, throat tight. Morrison's DNA charts flashed before him. Victoria's words, Ethan's texts, all piling into a wall between them. He said nothing. Sophie saw his silence, and her heart cracked. But she didn't weep. She lifted her chin. Fine. If you won't trust me, I'll protect myself and our child. Whatever it takes, I won't let anyone touch this baby. For the first time since stepping into the Monroe estate, Sophie felt the ground shift beneath her. This was no longer just a marriage, it was a battlefield. And she was no longer merely a gentle wife. She was a mother, and a mother's instinct burned hotter than any scheme. In the shadowed hallway, Christopher slipped away, having listened to every word. Smiling, he texted his mother. She's starting to suspect. The plan is working. Victoria read the message, lips curving into a thin smile. The game of Go was unfolding precisely as she had arranged. What she did not foresee, however, was that inside the heart of the woman she thought fragile, a flame had been lit, a flame that would one day consume every plot laid against her. That morning, an early winter wind swept through the Monroe garden in the Hamptons, carrying off the last clinging yellow leaves. Sophie stood at the bedroom window, rubbing her belly with both hands, watching the rose beds begin to fade. She couldn't explain the surge of unease rising in her chest. Since her confrontation with Victoria, the air in the house had thickened, as if even the walls were pressing in. A knock sounded. Maria, the housekeeper, entered with a cautious look. "Mr. Charles would like to see you." "Right now." "In the study." Sophie started. Charles rarely summoned her, especially now, as illness weakened his strength. She drew a steadying breath, smoothed her hair, and walked down the long corridor where warm lamplight glossed the ancestral portraits. Stern eyes followed her from the frames, and she felt she was walking into a tribunal. The study sprawled beneath a ceiling of dark beams, shelves of books climbing to the crown molding, the heavy oak desk perfumed with old leather and wood smoke. Charles sat behind it, silver hair unkempt, thin hands splayed across the blotter. Beside him, Victoria, sleek in dove-grey silk, watched like a hawk poised to strike. Christopher leaned against a bookcase, arms folded, a faint smile playing on his lips. Nathaniel was there too, perched on a side chair, face taut, eyes bruised with exhaustion. "Sophie," Charles rasped, authority still vibrating in his voice. "Sit." She took the chair opposite, her heart pounding. "We must speak frankly about the child," Charles said. The air seemed to drop. Sophie clasped her hands tighter. "Yes, Father. Dr. Morrison has given me certain information," Charles continued, the words leaden, "information that compels me to doubt whether the child truly carries Monroe blood." Sophie's face burned. She swung her gaze to Nathaniel, silently begging for a denial or defense. He only bowed his head. "No," she burst out. "This is Nathaniel's child. I swear to God." Victoria touched Charles's shoulder, her voice honeyed. "Charles, let's keep calm. Perhaps Sophie doesn't realize how serious this island, but we cannot look away. A century of legacy dissolves if this child is not of our blood." Christopher cut in, even-toned, and society is already whispering. "Some in our circle have heard rumors. The family's honor will be buried if we don't act now." Sophie swung toward them, eyes blazing. "You're crafting a tragedy on my back. I've done nothing wrong. I have never betrayed Nathaniel." Charles slammed his palm on the desk and fell into a coughing fit that rattled his frame. Nathaniel rose automatically, but his father's glacial stare stopped him mid-step. "Silence," Charles growled through the cough. "Do you know what I've sacrificed to build this empire? There's one condition left. The bloodline must continue. If you tell the truth, then prove it." Sophie paled. "Prove it? What do you want?" "Testing," Charles said. "Now. Before the child is born, if the results confirm it, I will apologize. If they do not," his eyes flared, "you will leave this family forever." The room constricted around her. "Sir, Testing this early can be dangerous. I won't gamble my child's life to gratify vicious suspicions. Victoria arched a brow, her tone satin smooth, poisonous beneath. If the baby truly is Nathaniel's, what is there to fear? Sophie turned to Nathaniel, desperate. Do you believe them? He stood rigid, fists clenched. In his eyes, a war raged. The love he bore her, the trust they'd built, colliding with Morrison's charges, Morrison's papers, and the crushing weight of his father's decree. At last, he managed, I don't know. Sophie's heart shattered. She surged to her feet, tears glistening in her eyes, though her voice stayed clear. Then I will prove it on my terms. But no one has the right to force me into endangering my child. My baby will not be the victim of blind, cruel doubt. She turned and strode out. The door thudded shut behind her. In the silence that followed, Charles sagged back, wheezing. Victoria squeezed Christopher's hand, a sliver of a smile cutting her face. Only a matter of time. The lamplight washed Sophie's exhausted but resolute features in her room that evening. She called Jessica and recounted everything. Jess, they're trying to force prenatal testing before it's safe. I can't. Jessica's voice came back, cool and powerful. You are not to sign anything they give you. You have the right to refuse. I'll fly to New York and file for a protective order if necessary. They cannot coerce you into risking your life or the baby's. Tears slid hot down Sophie's cheeks. Thank you. I'm afraid Nathaniel, he might not stand with me anymore. A beat of silence, then Jessica. Then you stand for yourself and your child. Keep every record, every shred of proof. Don't let them twist the truth. After the call, strength seeped back into Sophie's bones. She took out a journal and began to record it all. Dates, words, the glances Victoria wielded like weapons, Christopher's quiet smirk, the way Nathaniel's tenderness had cooled. Each line etched her resolve deeper. They would not destroy her. They would not touch her child. Charles and Nathaniel faced each other elsewhere in the study while wind keened at the windows. Charles leaned on his cane, age clouding his face but not his gaze. Nathaniel, he said slowly, you must choose, the family's path or the path of blind love. I love Sophie, Nathaniel said, voice raw. I want to believe her. Belief is not enough, Charles snapped, thumping the cane on the floor. When I'm gone, this entire empire will rest on your shoulders. Will you place it in the hands of a child who is not a Monroe? Nathaniel was silent. Sophie's face rose in his mind, pleading eyes. A hand over the life inside her, then drowned beneath Morrison's verdicts. Victoria's chill smile, Christopher's scorn. He felt himself torn in two. Father, he said at last, trembling, give me time. Charles exhaled, disappointment tightening his features. Time is not on our side. The longer you hesitate, the greater the peril to this family. Late that night, Nathaniel returned to their room. Sophie slept, tear tracks still silver on her cheeks. He sat on the bed's edge and watched her for a long while. His hand drifted toward the gentle swell of her belly, then recoiled, as if the truth it held might burn him. He loved her. He wanted achingly to trust her, but fear had rooted too deep. Instead of keeping her, he let the dark swallow them both. Elsewhere in the mansion, Victoria and Christopher clinked glasses of red wine. She's weakening, Christopher said. One more push, and Sophie will collapse on her own. Victoria sipped, eyes gleaming in the dim. And then, my son, we'll own everything. In the bedroom, Sophie dreamed of an invisible hand trying to rip the child from her womb. She jolted awake, skin slick with cold sweat, but a fire burned in her chest. Whatever happens, I will protect my baby even if I have to do it alone. No one will take my child from me. The night of the Monroe Foundation gala loomed like a fateful chess match. From morning, the Hamptons estate buzzed with activity teams of staff, glossy limousines arriving with gowns, jewels, makeup artists all deployed to shape the Monroes into the evening's radiant centerpiece at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. To outsiders, it was the most glamorous charity event of the year, where billionaires, politicians, Hollywood stars, and reporters crowded for a chance to be photographed with the Monroe family. But for Sophie, it felt like a nightmare waiting to unfold. Before the mirror, She slipped into a sea-green silk gown that traced her curves, the waistline subtly altered to hide the early swell of pregnancy. Light shimmered against her brown skin, her dark curls falling in soft waves. She was breathtaking, radiant like a goddess, but worry clouded her eyes. Behind her stood Nathaniel, immaculate in a black tuxedo, yet his gaze was shadowed like a sky before a storm. "Are you sure we have to go?" Sophie asked softly, her voice fragile. "Father insists," Nathaniel replied curtly, eyes averted. "If we don't, it only fuels gossip." Sophie touched his arm, pleading gently. "Nate, I know something is happening. I feel it. Everyone in this house looks at me like a stranger. If anything happens tonight, nothing will happen." He cut her off, gently removing her hand. "We show up, play our part, and leave." But Sophie's heart told her otherwise. Tonight would not be just another gala. It would be a battlefield. The Metropolitan Museum of Art blazed like a mythical castle under the night sky. Hundreds of reporters lined the red carpet, cameras flashing as the nation's most powerful figures stepped from limousines. When the Monroes arrived, the atmosphere hushed, just for a moment. Charles Monroe, frail and cane-bearing, still radiated the authority of a king. Victoria glided beside him in a midnight blue gown, her smile honed for the cameras. Christopher followed, all polished charm, every angle calculated for the press. Then came Nathaniel and Sophie. The young couple drew cheers, but beneath the roar of flashbulbs came the whispers, "She's pregnant," just as Nathaniel nears the will's deadline. Convenient, isn't it? Sophie heard the fragments as clearly as knives slicing the air. She clutched Nathaniel's hand. He didn't return the pressure. Inside the grand hall, chandeliers gleamed high above as the symphony swelled. Hundreds of guests in glittering gowns and tuxedos mingled, champagne glasses glinting, laughter and conversation swirling. Sophie walked beside Nathaniel, smiling politely at every greeting, though her heart quivered. Their eyes drifted downward, not to her face, but to her belly. "Congratulations, Sophie." A senator approached, smile sharp as a blade. Perfect timing. Charles must be thrilled. "Thank you," Sophie managed, forcing a smile. "A miracle indeed," a real estate tycoon added. "After all these years, an heir at last just before the deadline. Remarkable." Each sugar-sweet congratulation cut like velvet-covered knives. Sophie heard Victoria's quiet laugh in the crowd, triumphant and cruel. On stage, Charles Monroe took the microphone, his voice gravelly but commanding. "The Monroe Foundation was built to give opportunities to children in need. We believe in the power of future generations." He paused, eyes landing squarely on Sophie's midsection, "and in the assurance that the future is secure." Thunderous applause shook the hall. Sophie lowered her gaze, fear pressing against her ribs. At that instant, Nathaniel's phone vibrated. He glanced down at the message. A number he didn't know. "She invited me here. Waiting on the East Terrace." Signed, Ethan. Blood froze in his veins. He scanned the room, and through the archway leading to the terrace, he caught a glimpse. Sophie, speaking with a tall figure, black hair familiar, posture unmistakable. Ethan Delgado. Nathaniel's chest constricted. Rage surged. He strode toward the terrace, Christopher shadowing him like a wraith. Guests began to murmur, trailing after them. The night wind whipped across the terrace, lights of New York glittering beyond. Sophie stood by the railing, startled to find herself face to face with Ethan Delgado. He wore a black suit, lips curled in his trademark half-smile. "It's been a long time, Sophie," he drawled. "You're as beautiful as ever." When Nathaniel burst through the doors, Sophie frowned, already turning to leave. "Sophie!" His voice cracked like thunder. Both turned. Nathaniel's eyes blazed with fury. "Do you have anything to say?" Stunned, Sophie shook her head. "Nate, I didn't arrange this. I walked out, and he approached me." "Lies!" his shout carried, drawing dozens of curious guests onto the terrace. "You invited him, didn't you? You've betrayed me in my own house, and now you want to use this child as a shield." The whispers exploded. "Affair, scandal, how disgraceful." Victoria arrived at just the right moment, hand raised to her mouth in shock. Christopher shook his head slowly, playing the role of horrified witness. "Nate, "Have you lost your mind?" Sophie cried, tears spilling. She clutched his hand desperately. "This is your child. I've never betrayed you." But Nathaniel ripped his hand away, voice like ice. "I have proof, Sophie. Dr. Morrison, everything he showed me, this child isn't mine." Gasps rippled. Phones rose, cameras capturing it all. Sophie felt struck by lightning. "You believe them over me? You trust those who despise me more than the woman who swore before God she belongs only to you?" Her voice cracked, drowned beneath the tide of venomous murmurs. Ethan merely shrugged and walked away, that devilish smirk curving his lips. He didn't need words, his presence was poison enough. Nathaniel's heart screamed, but his mouth delivered cruelty. "Get out of my sight, Sophie. Don't let me see you again." She stood frozen, tears streaming, all eyes devouring her shame. Cameras flashed, sealing her humiliation in pixels. The woman once hailed as the jewel of the Monroe family was now cast as a fraud before the world. Her body shook. One arm wrapped around her belly, the other braced against the railing to avoid collapsing. In that moment, she understood. They had succeeded. Victoria, Christopher, Morrison, and Ethan together, they had pushed her over the edge. And her husband, the man she loved, was the one who let her fall. Somewhere, a laugh flared and died in the crowd. Silence followed, heavy as mourning cloth. Sophie drew a deep breath, lifted her head though her tears still ran, and walked steadily through the parted crowd. The gala continued, music and laughter resuming, but for Sophie it was a funeral for her love, honor, and faith. For Victoria, it was a coronation. In the limousine that carried her away from the museum, Sophie sat silently, both hands clutching her belly. Pain burned inside like fire, but beneath it, something new ignited. They wanted to destroy her and her child. She would not let them win. Never. 6 months had passed since the gala, yet its aftershocks still thundered like a storm that refused to die. The headquarters of Monroe Media in Manhattan, once blazing with light, now stood half-dark most evenings. The boardroom, where Nathaniel Monroe had once been celebrated, was thick with wary glances and whispered doubts. The stock price plummeted. Strategic partners pulled out. Lucrative contracts vanished overnight. Newspapers that once hailed Monroe Media as the empire that shaped America's opinion now ran savage headlines. The betrayed heir, or the betrayer, and Monroe Media. From apex to abyss. On the 60th floor, Nathaniel sat in his office, Central Park green and endless beyond the glass, unable to calm the chaos inside him. His desk sagged beneath red-lined financial reports and threatening letters from shareholders demanding his resignation. His hair was disheveled, his beard patchy, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He could never escape the memory of that night, the moment he had denounced Sophie in front of hundreds. The image had flooded social media within hours, dissected, mocked, replayed until it drowned the Monroe name in ridicule. No one spoke of his empire anymore, only of his broken marriage, the questioned bloodline, the scandal. Nathaniel gripped his glass of whiskey. The burn seared his throat but only sharpened the memory. Sophie's tear-soaked face, her voice breaking. "You believe them over me?" His chest knotted each time it returned. Yet Morrison's verdict, Victoria's icy gaze, and Christopher's sneer echoed. The child carries no Monroe blood. He no longer knew what was true. Elsewhere in New York, Sophie Harper lived a life stripped bare. Her refuge was a cramped apartment on the 3rd floor of an aging Brooklyn walk-up. Gone were the silks and banquets, replaced with wailing infants, sleepless nights, and hands calloused by endless care. She had given birth to twins, a boy and a girl. On the day they came into the world, only her mother and Jessica were there. No Nathaniel, no Charles, no Monroes. Sophie had wept not from pain, but from a heart cleaved in two. The boy she named Charles Benjamin Harper to honor the father-in-law she had once respected, and to remind herself that this child was worthy of the Monroe name, no matter their denial. The girl was named Elizabeth Rose Harper, after Nathaniel's late mother, a woman Sophie had never met, but felt close to through stories. The children were beautiful, dark-eyed, with stubborn little chins unmistakably Nathaniel's. Each time Sophie looked at them, A bittersweet ache surged. "You are proof of true love," she whispered, kissing their foreheads. "And I will protect you, even if the whole world turns away." Life was grueling. Sophie picked up small consulting projects online, working as they slept, while she shuttled between grocery stores and clinics by day. Her mother helped where she could, but age weighed heavily. Many nights, Sophie cradled both babies until exhaustion dragged her into sleep on the sofa. Yet in her eyes there was no trace of the fragile girl she once was. Suffering had forged her into steel. At the Hamptons estate, Victoria and Christopher tightened their grip. Charles Monroe was fading fast, cancer in its final stages. Victoria managed documents, controlled board meetings, and maneuvered to edge Nathaniel further from power. Christopher insinuated himself into every gathering, rising as the new face of the family. One evening, Nathaniel staggered home, drunk, collapsing into a chair. Victoria approached, her expression painted with feigned concern. "You're destroying yourself, Nathaniel. The company is collapsing. If you can't bear it, let Christopher shoulder the burden." Nathaniel let out a bitter laugh. "That's what you've wanted all along, right?" Victoria said nothing, only smiled faintly, her eyes glittering with victory. On a storm-soaked morning, a plain envelope appeared on Nathaniel's desk. No sender. Inside lay a report from a private investigation firm. DNA results of 2 newborn children, an exact match to him. Nathaniel froze. His pulse hammered as his eyes devoured the words. "Mine? My children?" he whispered, voice shaking. But doubt stabbed at once. What if it was a trick? Another trap to ensnare him? He crushed the paper in his fist and tossed it into the fireplace. Flames devoured it, yet the fire in his chest remained. He remembered Sophie, her laughter, the scent of her hair, the way she murmured his name in the night. He remembered the anguish in her eyes as he condemned her. Now, staring at the photographs included with the report, 2 infants whose eyes mirrored his own, his hands trembled uncontrollably. Sophie, meanwhile, carried on. But shadows trailed her. Sometimes a strange car idled outside her building. Once, a man followed her to the grocery before vanishing. She knew Victoria had not let go. One evening, Jessica visited. They sat on the sofa watching the twins sleep. Jessica spoke softly. "Sophie, I dug deeper into Morrison. He's drowning in gambling debt. And guess who paid it off?" Sophie clenched her fists. "Victoria," Jessica nodded. "It's becoming clear. But to prove it, we'll need more. And Sophie, you must prepare yourself. If Nathaniel learns the truth, could you forgive him?" Silence stretched long. Finally, tears slid down Sophie's cheeks. "I don't know. My heart still loves him, even after he destroyed everything. But forgiveness, maybe never." Late at night, Nathaniel stood at his tower window, city lights blazing beneath him. He held the photograph of the twins that had come with the report, their images in his hand, tiny reflections of his own. For the first time in months, a tear broke free. He whispered, "If they're really mine, what have I done?" Outside, the sky split with lightning, thunder rolling over Manhattan. A new storm was coming. The Monroe estate in the Hamptons was cloaked in mourning. Once a symbol of opulence, filled with endless soirees, now it lay hushed, oppressive in its silence. On the second floor, in a dimly lit bedroom, Charles Monroe lay gasping on his deathbed. The respirator hissed steadily, measuring the final moments of a man who had once commanded nations with a signature. Cancer had stripped him bare. His body was wasted, his face gaunt, his eyes sunken, yet within them flickered a stubborn clarity. In pain, he had more time than ever to think, and in that silence, he saw truths he had ignored all his life. He remembered the gala night, the tears streaking Sophie's face as Nathaniel condemned her before hundreds. He remembered Victoria's feigned shock, her eyes glittering with satisfaction, and Morrison, trusted for 3 generations, appeared with irrefutable proof. Piece by piece, the image formed. Something was wrong. In a fevered moment, Charles beckoned the old butler, Lenny, to his side. "Lenny, you have served this family for 40 years. Now I need that loyalty, one last time." Tears glistened in Lenny's eyes. "Yes, sir. Investigate Morrison. And the accounts Victoria controls. I must know the truth before I close my eyes. A week later, Lenny returned with a thick folder. Charles trembled as he opened it, each page carving deeper into his chest. Gambling debts, transfers from Victoria's secret accounts, records of Morrison pocketing hundreds of thousands for special medical advice, photographs of Christopher exchanging envelopes with Ethan Delgado in a dingy Queen's bar. Charles sat in silence, every sheet a wound. Proof undeniable. He had been deceived. His wife and her son staged the play, which tore Nathaniel and Sophie apart. My God, his frail shoulders shook. I destroyed my daughter-in-law. I shattered my son's faith, all because I clung to bloodlines and let Victoria poison me. Tears streamed down the face of the man once feared on Wall Street. For the first time in decades, Charles Monroe wept like a child. The next day, he summoned Nathaniel. His son entered, hollow-eyed, broken by months of drink and ruin. Charles dismissed the nurse until only father and son remained. Nate. Charles gripped his son's hand, his own skeletal and cold. I was wrong. Nathaniel frowned. Wrong about what, father? Charles drew a shuddering breath. Sophie, she never betrayed you. It was all Victoria and Christopher. I have proof. Morrison was bought. Ethan was staged. And I. Let them destroy us. Nathaniel froze, every word striking like lightning. No, no, that can't be. Charles met his eyes, fierce despite failing breath. Believe me, this once. Sophie and the twins are yours. I've seen their photographs. They are your blood. Do not let Victoria steal what belongs to you. Tears welled as Nathaniel clutched his father's hand. God, what have I done? I condemned her before the world. Charles rasped. Mistakes can be mended if you act in time. I wrote Sophie a letter. My confession, my apology. Deliver it before it's too late. He drew a sealed envelope from the nightstand, scrawled across it, for Sophie Harper from Charles Monroe. Promise me you'll give it to her. And protect your children. They are the true legacy of this family. Nathaniel broke down, sobbing in his father's arms. Father and son wept together while outside. A summer storm battered the windows, heralding change. Days later, Charles's health collapsed. He summoned his lawyer and signed a new will with what strength remained. The Monroe Empire would pass to Nathaniel and his lawful heirs, with Sophie named guardian should Nathaniel falter. Victoria was cut out entirely. Christopher was relegated to a modest allowance. When Victoria learned, she screamed, shattering a vase in fury. Christopher's face blanched, his arrogance stripped. No, he can't do this. Charles still had enough strength to glare them down. I wasted 15 years trusting the wrong people. I will not let you destroy us any longer. Charles sat by the window on his final night, staring at the withered rose garden. Nathaniel sat beside him, holding his hand. Father, what should I tell Sophie? Charles smiled faintly. Tell her I am sorry. Tell her I know she is strong, loyal, and worthy, that she gave this family 2 angels. My only regret is never holding them once. His voice thinned, his eyes drifted shut. Before sleep claimed him, he whispered, Nate, never let money outweigh love. An empire may fall, but family is all that endures. Charles Monroe passed away at dawn, in peace. News of his death swept the media. Tributes poured in for the titan who had once bent markets. But inside the Hamptons estate, another war erupted. Victoria tried to block the new will, but the lawyer produced a signed, witnessed document. Her fury cracked the house like thunder. She swore Sophie would never return to the Monroe name. Meanwhile, Nathaniel drove toward Brooklyn, his heart pounding. In his pocket lay Charles's letter for Sophie. Every mile pulled him taut between dread of rejection and the fragile hope of redemption. His father's words echoed, Do not let mistakes bury everything. When his car stopped before the shabby apartment building, he stared motionless. From a third-floor window, golden lamplight spilled out. Sophie's silhouette moved inside, cradling one of the twins. His chest clenched so many moments he had forfeited. Now, he stood at the edge of the door he had to knock upon. the threshold of the woman he had once loved above all, and whom he had wounded beyond measure. In his hand, the letter trembled with his pulse. This was his final chance not only to return the truth, but to deliver Sophie the apology of a man who had once doubted her, condemned her, and at last understood the true worth of love and family. Outside, rain fell heavily, washing away years of dust. Nathaniel stepped from the car, lifted his head, and drew a long breath. That door ahead was either the beginning of redemption or the end forever. A grey autumn afternoon draped itself over Brooklyn. Rain whispered against the narrow street as Nathaniel pulled his luxury car to a stop before the weathered red brick building. He sat motionless at the wheel, his hands gripping so tightly the leather went white. From a third-floor window, a warm yellow glow spilled through thin curtains, and in silhouette, he glimpsed Sophie cradling a child. His chest clenched. Charles's letter was in his coat pocket, the envelope yellowed, and the shaky handwriting scrawled, "To Sophie Harper." With every heartbeat, it seemed to burn hotter, urging him forward. But fear weighed him down. If Sophie rejected him, if she looked at him with hatred, would he survive it? At last, he opened the door, letting the rain strike his face. He climbed the rickety wooden stairs, each step heavy as lead. At the door of apartment 3B, he paused. A baby's cry pierced the air, strange yet painfully familiar. He raised his hand and knocked softly. The door opened. Sophie stood there, gaunt but radiant with unbroken strength. In her arms was a little girl, cheeks round, dark eyes shining like polished stones. Sophie froze. "Nathaniel." Her voice was hoarse, cold. "What are you doing here?" He swallowed hard, pulled out the envelope, and held it out. "I brought this. From Father." Sophie's eyes flickered. Her hand trembled as she read the handwritten address. She turned away, laying the baby in her crib, then carefully slit open the flap. The scent of old paper wafted up as the shaky words revealed themselves. "Sophie, I was wrong. I let Victoria and Morrison deceive me. I doubted your loyalty, even urged Nathaniel to abandon you. But the truth, the child is Monroe blood. I have seen the proof. You are the daughter-in-law I should have cherished. Forgive a blind older man." Tears coursed down Sophie's cheeks. She collapsed into a chair, clutching the letter like a lifeline. Each word cut into her wounds, yet also poured balm on them. "I was wrong." Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice breaking. "I let them control me, fed me lies. I don't deserve to ask, but please, give me a chance to make this right." Sophie lifted her gaze, her eyes red with fury and lingering love. "A chance? You condemned me before hundreds. You let the world call me a traitor. And when I bore our children, drenched in blood and tears, where were you?" Nathaniel's breath shuddered, his feet unable to move closer. "I know. No words can suffice. But I want to be here. For you. For them. I lost 6 months. Don't make me lose a lifetime." From the bedroom, the cry of a baby boy rang out. Sophie rose, disappeared, then returned with him in her arms. Nathaniel fell to his knees, trembling. The boy's eyes were his own. The jawline was his. Tears broke loose as his head bowed to the floor. "My God," he whispered, "they are mine. I denied my own blood." Sophie watched, her heart torn, half longing to rush into his arms, half needing to shield her children from the man who had once forsaken them. "I need time," she said at last, voice unsteady. "I can't forgive in a single day." Nathaniel nodded, tears mixing with the rain. "I'll wait, as long as it takes." Neither knew that downstairs, a black sedan sat parked. Inside, 2 men in long coats watched, a small device blinking on the dashboard. Every word, the letter, the confession, the pleas was recorded. A text was sent from the back seat. "We have the tape. Clear audio. Awaiting orders." Minutes later, the reply arrived. "Bring it to me. V." At the Hamptons estate, Victoria Monroe sipped red wine in the drawing room. When she received the USB, she smiled thinly. "Excellent." Christopher, across from her, narrowed his eyes. "What are you planning?" She swirled her glass, her tone venomous. "Nathaniel thinks a letter from his father can win Sophie back." "No, I'll turn his begging into his destruction. The press will feast on it. A so-called heir, on his knees, sobbing, admitting he was deceived his career will be finished. Christopher chuckled darkly. And Sophie? If you release this, people might believe she's innocent. Victoria's lips curled. And what of it? When Nathaniel loses all dignity and loses the empire, Sophie will be nothing but a mother of two, struggling in poverty. Innocent or not, she'll still be the loser. Her eyes gleamed with cruel triumph. In the Brooklyn apartment, Sophie laid the twins in their crib. Nathaniel still sat there, chained by guilt. She fetched a thin blanket and handed it to him. If you want to stay tonight, the sofa. But don't expect more. Hope flickered in Nathaniel's eyes. Thank you. That night, Sophie slept more soundly than she had in months, though heaviness lingered. Nathaniel lay awake on the sofa, eyes fixed on the ceiling, heart drowning in guilt, yet steeling with resolve. He would protect Sophie and the children, even if it meant war with Victoria. He didn't know that by morning, tabloids would blaze with headlines. Monroe heir on his knees begging estranged wife, entire conversation leaked. The article carried the audio file in full. Nathaniel's voice echoed across every site. I was wrong. I denied my own blood. Nearby were paparazzi shots of him kneeling outside Sophie's apartment in the rain. In Monroe Media's boardroom, executives erupted. He has disgraced us, a shareholder thundered. No one can trust Monroe anymore. At the Hamptons estate, Victoria sat silently, smiling in satisfaction as the footage looped on TV. She whispered, "The game is nearly over." His stomach dropped when Nathaniel left a corner store and saw tabloids plastered across the racks. He snatched one, his hands trembling as he read the vile captions. Around him, strangers pointed and laughed. He raced back to Sophie's apartment, heart pounding. Inside, Sophie already stood before the television, eyes swollen. She turned, her voice cold as steel. "You said you'd protect us, and now the whole world mocks us as a circus." Nathaniel's throat tightened. "I swear, I didn't leak it. This is Victoria's doing." Sophie lifted her son, her gaze firm. "Whoever it was, the result is the same. I lost my honor once. Now it's your turn. But I won't endure another fall. If you want to stay, prove it. If not, leave." Nathaniel stood frozen. Outside, rain hammered down, echoing the storm tearing through their hearts. That night, as Sophie held the twins, Nathaniel sat in darkness, his head buried in his hands. The battle was not over. Victoria had played her cruelest card, but he swore she would not win. His father's words rang in him, "Never let money outweigh love. Family is all that endures." For the first time, Nathaniel felt true clarity. He knew, if he did not act now, he would lose everything: Sophie, the children, and his very soul. The New York sky hung heavy and grey, as if warning of an inevitable reckoning. In the small Brooklyn apartment, Sophie held her sleeping twins, the weak glow of the nightlight softening her tired but peaceful face. Nathaniel sat by the window, watching the endless fall of rain. He knew he could no longer let Victoria hold power, not for the sake of the Monroe Empire, but for Sophie, and for the two small lives breathing steadily in the next room. The next morning, Nathaniel called his father's longtime attorney, Mr. Harris, an older man, still razor-sharp. They met in a quiet cafe in Lower Manhattan. Harris opened his briefcase and slid across a thick stack of documents. "Before he died," Harris said, "Charles gave me everything: proof of Victoria's plot, transfers, gambling debt payoffs, and recorded calls. He wanted the truth exposed, but only when you were ready." Nathaniel's hands shook around the file. "Ready? I let Sophie and the children be humiliated. I squandered everything. If I hesitate any longer, nothing will be left to save." Harris nodded, grave. "Then it's time." At the Hamptons estate, Victoria lounged on a settee in a fur wrap, smiling with satisfaction at the morning headline. "Monroe heir implodes, company near bankruptcy." Christopher entered, worried. "Mother, the stock is worse than we expected. The shareholders are preparing a vote to oust Nathaniel." "Even better," Victoria said, sipping her wine. "When he has nothing, you and I will have everything." Christopher hesitated. "But what if Sophie really has evidence? Victoria laughed softly. She's a cast-off. Who would believe her over a Monroe, especially after the gala exposed her to the world? Don't fret, Christopher. We've already won. The door burst open. Nathaniel stood in the threshold, rain still on his coat, his face set like stone. Victoria faltered, then recovered her poise. Oh, my son. Perfect timing. I was telling Christopher you'll be removed soon. Such a pity. Nathaniel laid the documents on the table, and each word was measured. The pity is yours. These are the records father left, payments to Morrison, the casino debts you covered, photographs of Christopher trading envelopes with Ethan. It's all here. For an instant, Victoria's face blanched. Then she laughed. You think a stack of papers changes anything? Who will believe you? The press, the shareholders, they've already turned. Nathaniel unlocked his phone and pressed play. Charles Monroe's voice filled the room, weak but unmistakably clear. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. Victoria, Christopher, and Morrison deceived me and destroyed Sophie. Don't let them take your family. Protect Sophie and the children. They are my true legacy. The air crystallized. Christopher went ashen. No, that's impossible. Forgery. Victoria snapped. Nathaniel had prepared for this. He tossed another envelope onto the table. Harris's seal gleamed on the flap. Certified originals. Father left them with the new will. Everything you and Christopher seized will be undone. Victoria slammed her hand down. The wineglass shattered. You fool. You think you can save Sophie? Society has condemned her. Even if the truth gets out, the stain remains. She'll never hold her head high. The door opened. Sophie stepped in, Elizabeth on her hip, with Jessica behind her carrying baby Charles. Sophie's eyes were bright, her face unyielding. You're wrong, Victoria. I held my head high the day I left this house. I don't need the Monroe name to live, but I won't let you ruin us again. Victoria's glare sharpened. You dare set foot in here? Sophie set Elizabeth in a portable bassinet, then pulled a small USB from her pocket. This contains copies of everything Morrison and Ethan confessed, drunken, careless, thinking they were safe. I'll release it to the press and to the world, not only to clear my name, but to show them yours, both of you. Christopher panicked. Mother, what do we do? Victoria's fingers dug into the chair. You think a woman like her can defeat me? Nathaniel, don't be a fool. Turn your back now, or the empire is finished. You'll have nothing. Nathaniel stepped to Sophie's side and took her hand. I once believed money was everything. That belief cost me my wife and children. Today I chose Sophie. So be it if I must lose this empire to keep my family. Sophie faltered slightly, her heart stuttering at his words. Victoria shrieked, voice curdled with fury. Traitors! You will all die poor. At that moment, Harris entered with 2 security officers. His tone was calm as steel. Mrs. Victoria Monroe, you are under investigation for bribery, fraud, and falsifying medical records. This is a court order. The officers moved in. Victoria writhed, eyes blazing with hate. Sophie, you will pay for this. I swear it. But the door closed on her screams. Christopher collapsed into a chair, head bowed. Mother, it's all gone. Harris tapped his cane once. No, Mr. Christopher, you lost it long ago. The press exploded with the scandal in the following days. Victoria was arrested, Christopher was under investigation, and Morrison confessed to everything. Sophie was vindicated. The recordings and documents laid bare the years-long conspiracy. Public opinion whiplashed, the mockery turned to sympathy. Sophie didn't care about the crowd. What mattered was that her honor had been restored, and her children would grow up without shame. Nathaniel formally announced his resignation from Monroe Media. The company, unable to withstand the storm, tumbled toward bankruptcy. He did not regret it. At the final press conference, he said only, "An empire can be lost. Family is the one thing I will not lose again." One crisp morning, Sophie carried the twins through a small Brooklyn park. Gold leaves sprinkled the path. Autumn light fell gently through the trees. Nathaniel walked beside her, fingers intertwined with hers. He watched the children, then turned to Sophie. I know it will take a long time for you to forgive me. I'll walk it, step by step, with you and them. Sophie looked at him, eyes shining. You let me fall once. Don't ever do it again. It's not just me now, these two little souls." Nathaniel nodded, fierce and sure. "I swear." The twins squealed with laughter, small hands reaching for their father. Nathaniel lifted them, tears breaking free. For the first time, he felt whole not with power or wealth, but with his family in his arms. On the wind, it was as if Charles's words returned. An empire may fall, but love and family are the true legacy. Sophie rested her head on Nathaniel's shoulder and whispered, "We're home." Beyond them, the world roared on. But in that moment, everything softened and stilled. They knew that a new chapter had begun from here, no harsh spotlights, no power plays, only love, trust, and children's laughter scoring the music of a new beginning.